office, he stepped into a position that had claimed the lives of two predecessors through heart attacks. How did this young leader transform a widowmaker role into 2 decades of sustained leadership? The answers reveal a gripping story of survival, strategy, and transformation in Caribbean politics. Join us for a riveting conversation with the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind the Prime Minister's Carrot Success, Dr. Philbert Aaron, with the book that's got everyone talking about Dominica's political evolution. This Wednesday, October 8th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., only on Kyrie FM, the genuine sound of Dominica.
6 minutes now after the hour of 6 o'clock in the Eastern Caribbean. It is 6 minutes after 5 where I am in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, welcome, welcome to a very special program on Kyrie FM. I am Kamala Aaron. What a pleasure it is to be in your company again on this platform on Kyrie FM, my stomping ground, really. My stomping ground, really. Happy to have you joining us wherever you are in Dominica, the nature island, which is in full independence mode right now. Happy Independence Anniversary to all Dominicans in Dominica and everywhere around the world. And thank you so much for joining us here this evening. I am excited for this special interview that we're going to do tonight. But before I start the interview, I would, and welcome my guest, before I welcome my guest, I want to take this opportunity in this broadcast to pay tribute to a former broadcaster, a DJ really. I want to convey my deepest sympathies to the family of Ted Daly, the bosom body, the bosom buddy, the guy with the infectious big laugh that made you laugh, even if you were not an insider on the joke. Ted was bold, unapologetic on DBS, and I think he was ahead of his time. He played music that he thought the people needed, even when it may not have been co-signed by his leadership. And he told you how he felt by the music that he played. Let me tell you how bold Ted was. In 1998, I just started working at DBS as a young broadcaster. And as used to be done, you'd be put through the paces when you are first in broadcasting. So I was not immediately allowed to do any real presentation of any newscasts. What I was allowed to do as a testing ground for my skills, really, I was given the assignment to read the 6 o'clock news preview at 5 p.m. That was inside of Ted Daly's drive time show. And one day I came into the studio to do the preview, and after I was done, Ted Daly did something that shocked me. He advocated for me on air. Here's what he said. After I was done with the preview, he said, "I bon man, by job la, I bon." That was Ted advocating for me live on air. I have never forgotten it. I will never forget it. And I am extremely appreciative of that kind of bold advocacy from a colleague. So I take this time before we get into this interview to pay tribute and to give my sympathies to his family and friends, the bosom buddy, Ted Daly. This evening, though, we have a fascinating conversation ahead as we delve into the intricate world of Eastern Caribbean politics with our distinguished guest, the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind PM Skerritt's Success. This groundbreaking work pulls back the curtain on our region's unique political landscape, offering unprecedented insights into how power is gained, maintained, and wielded in our nations. Drawing from 2 decades of hands on experience, our guest provides the first comprehensive guide to understanding the unwritten rules that govern our political system. Whether you're a political aspirant, a student of Caribbean governance, or simply interested in understanding how our democracy truly functions, you will not want to miss this revealing discussion about the machinery of power in the Eastern Caribbean. And I can tell you that I'm going to ask him all the things that I know you are wondering. I'm going to ask him. Um, yeah, I'm going to ask him all the things. There will be no stone left unturned. I can promise you that. Let me welcome the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind PM Skerritt's Success, Dr. Philbert Aaron. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Kamala. I'm very happy to be here.
Are you?
I am, absolutely.
I'm going to ask you all the things.
Yes, I welcome it. Thanks for that.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What a birthday gift that you have, um, launching the book that you have spent so much time on and worked so hard to do. What a birthday gift for you.
Yes, I'm fortunate, actually. I'm very fortunate here, like you suggest, to have this happen on my birthday. I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful to my dear wife, Kamala, and I'm grateful to my kids, Olufemi, Tamara, and little Oluchi. I'm grateful to my friends also, my colleagues, um, and all those people who have sent birthday wishes. I'm very grateful. I'm touched. Thank you so very much.
Okay, so let's get into it. And like I said, I'm going to ask you all the things. I think it is important that I ask you everything that I think is necessary as we delve into the discussion of this groundbreaking manuscript. To be very honest, it's really groundbreaking. And sometimes I think people think when you don't address the elephant in the room that it somehow disappears from public consciousness, but it does not. The questions that I think people want to know or want answered, I'm gonna ask you. So if you're ready, let's go. Um, let's start simply with the most basic. What inspired you to write the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind PM Skerritt's Success?
I wrote the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook to provide knowledge about what we don't know on political leadership in the Eastern Caribbean. What we did not know is how Eastern Caribbean prime ministers last long. So that was a gap in our knowledge of our own political leadership practice. And I wanted to fill that gap in our knowledge and do it in a manner that was solid, researched, and grounded in data.
So let me understand something before I ask another question. You're saying that we, us as Caribbean people in this Eastern Caribbean, did not know what exactly?
we did not know how the Eastern Caribbean political systems, together forming a political model, that is Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, how it is that they produce this characteristic phenomenon, which is an extremely long-lasting prime minister. Roosevelt's Garrett currently 21 record-breaking consecutive years at prime minister in Dominica. Ralph Gonsalves, 24 consecutive years in office. Just two examples. So we did not know how that is done.
Even if we were voting for prime ministers over decades, we as a Caribbean people did not know how they came into office and more specifically, how they lasted long. We did not know that.
No, we did not know that. Now, here is how I concluded that we did not know that. Everything that is being said in newspapers, on the radio, in conversations, published, you listen to people, and especially you listen to the practitioners, political opposition, that is, those who are in the system seeking the position of prime minister, cabinet, parliamentarians. When you listen to them, their explanations are non-scientific. The interesting thing, though, is nobody was saying, let us prove these explanations or disprove them. And I did. Okay? And now we know that. Now it is significant. It is significant that we know this. We know how to explain how a prime minister lasts 15 years, 20 years, and more. It is significant because it helps to improve our understanding of our own political system. We need to understand those political systems. We live in them. We govern them. We protect them. We try to improve them. We need to know that. But there is this practical aspect to it, that how do you prepare a leader potentially to last long? That is significant knowledge that comes from finding out how it is that these leaders last long. And here's a big problem. The group of people that are closest to this knowledge of how Eastern Caribbean prime ministers last long, the practitioners, they have tacit knowledge. That is knowledge that cannot be and is not presented, for example, in black and white. That is not codified. That is not examined. That is not taught. So it is tacit knowledge, kind of like what certain sectors in our society practice. Farmers, a lot of our farmers in the Eastern Caribbean know their practice, know when to sow, know when to reap, know how to do things. But that knowledge is tacit. It is not explicit.
Got it.
It is not tested. It is not necessarily improved. That is the situation we have in political leadership. And now, this book, the Eastern Caribbean Political Leadership Playbook, makes a contribution towards filling that gap.
So I'll ask you this then. Why this book and why now?
You know, the truth is that this book has been needed for a while. There has been the need for this kind of book. This book has been something that the public has needed for a long time. but it is especially needed now. Now is a particular moment in the history of democracies. Democracies are being challenged, including in the Eastern Caribbean. Okay? But also, we need to know this kind of knowledge because in everything, a modern society needs a blueprint, especially a blueprint for doing things well, including for doing things for a long time. Architecture has blueprints, construction has blueprints, engineering has blueprints. But for the most serious thing, which is the political leadership of the entire community, the entire state, there is no blueprint. So now there is a blueprint for political leadership at the highest level, highest political level, prime minister for Eastern Caribbean states.
So let me ask you this now. Some people may think, so there's a blueprint, but the blueprint comes from someone who clearly has shown that his allegiance is to a political party, one political party, namely the Dominican Labour Party. Can that blueprint be for everybody? Can it be impartial, so to speak?
Absolutely. And a friend asked me that question very recently. So it's very interesting that you, interviewer, would ask that question. But the answer is yes. Why? Because there are processes in science that put a fence around your subjectivity, that allows you, that fence allows you to be objective. So, for example, the process of writing this book is research based. That is, I got the data for this book by observation, by collection, by counting, by measuring. And not only is that data objective information, and what does it mean that it's objective? It means that if somebody else looks at the very same data, they are very likely to end up with the same conclusions. But not only is it at the level of data, the data is collected, it's analyzed, it's reanalyzed, again, to protect from bias. And not only is it reanalyzed, I got to a point of saturation. What that means in research is I gather the information, I make sense of it, meaning I analyze it. It tells me something, but I do not rush to publish. I hold that data and see it confirmed by new events, as well as nothing new comes up. Even if I get new facts, the very same pattern occurs. And so that is saturation. It means that no matter how long you continue to gather more data, the conclusion will be the same. And so these are measures that create objectivity in the work. And eventually, this can be tested, this can be proven by other people, people other than myself. Of course, readers also get to determine that because the concept of trustworthiness, that is, when you read or you listen to what I have found, you ask yourself, does that sound like what is going on? Does that sound like what I see? Does that sound like what is being practiced? These are forms that tell you, that answer your question, that although it is by a man who's been closely associated with one political party, but the data, the conclusions, the lessons in the playbook really are universal for our Eastern Caribbean, irrespective of what political affiliation you have.
Why hasn't anyone documented this? unwritten rules of Caribbean politics before, do you think?
Well, the truth is, I cannot really answer why no one else wrote this before. But what I can say is this: I am the first to approach this matter in this way. My understanding is that it is because I looked at Eastern Caribbean politics from a unique angle, from a unique vantage point. And the uniqueness of me watching this politics comes from being at the intersection, being at the point where a number of things meet. Research. I am a trained researcher at the highest level. I have also had expertise in learning the act of learning. How do human beings, including professionals, how do professionals become better? Specifically, how do political leaders become better? The discipline of leadership itself, as well as politics. So I have been at the intersection of these areas. And that intersection gives me this unique vantage point. Let me give you the example specifically. So I'm a PhD researcher. I'm a former professor. But here is what was new. That PhD, that former professor, got an operational job in the office of the Prime Minister. That does not happen often. By operational job, it means I am not advising. I'm not just sitting there telling people what to do. I am doing. Specifically, I was ambassador to Venezuela, ambassador to Alba. These are operational positions. I was the public relations officer of the Dominican Labour Party. That is an operational position. I do things. Okay? I stage managed election campaigns of the Dominican Labour Party. Those are operational positions. So what that gave me is a viewpoint. It allowed me to see things that others might not have seen. And if others had seen it, this experience, this intersection allowed me to come to the problem of knowing how do these leaders last long? It gave me that viewpoint that caused me to arrive at a playbook, a set of practices, one could say rules, a set of practices, a set of principles, a set of rules that explain why certain leaders, many leaders of the Eastern Caribbean, last a long tenure, not just 5 years, more than 6, more than 10, more than 15, and in some cases more than 20 years consecutively.
What is long in the Eastern Caribbean model? What is the length of time of long?
That's a great question. So
I'm here until 8.
So law has a definition in research and in this particular research. So it is based, of course, law has a definition, short has a definition. Where short ends, long begins. And it is based on the model, the overall model of politics, which is the Westminster parliamentary style system of politics, in which a term of office lasts 5 years. And so 5 years or less than 5 years definitely are short, especially because in our system, in our small subset of Westminster style constitutions, there is no term limit on prime minister. In other words, as long as prime minister gets elected, he can go on leading. And so in that context, long is more than one term. It's specifically at least 6 years. That is long. Short is less than that. And so extremely long, goes into the territory of 10, 15, 20, and that kind of period. So less than 6 years, short. More than 6 years, long.
it's very interesting because as soon as you put a number on it, all of us as listeners understand very clearly what is long and what is short, and who served long and who served short, just by hearing the number, which again gives part of the uh, predictability, so to speak, of the content.
And that is
Now,
very
let me
interesting,
Mhm.
Kamala,
Go
because
ahead.
a number of citizens of our various countries do not realize who is short,
Yeah.
who is lasting short. So, for example, in Dominica, we've had 7 prime ministers. Only 2 have lasted long.
Mhm.
Mary Eugenia Charles, 15 years, that's 14 years, 11 months specifically, and Roosevelt Skerrit, 21 consecutive years.
Mhm.
5 other prime ministers, that is, the first one, Patrick John, less than 5 years, specifically 200 and some days. Rosie Douglas, short. Oliver Seraphim, short. Pierre Charles, short. Edison James, short. A quick tally tells you that in the Dominica case, 5, majority of the 7 prime ministers have had short tenures.
Mhm.
And by explaining long tenure, I am implicitly approaching the topic of explaining short tenures also. So
Okay.
that's pretty interesting in itself.
Got it. How long did it take you to write this book?
A cool 10 years,
10.
1-0. So
That's
that's
an
a lot.
entire that's an entire decade.
That's
That's
yes, yes,
Oluchi
that's a
has not even lived that long yet.
absolutely. But it also means is a lot of time uh, away from my dear wife, even if it's in the room next door or researching or writing. A lot of time away from my kids. It's that you that's significant, but it's 10 years.
Yeah, I can attest to that. Just by way of information to the public, I many times I said, I think you need to shut this project down. I really think it's time to shut this project down. Um, as you were writing, did you ever think, hmm, maybe I'm saying too much or giving too much away? Did that thought ever come to your mind at any time?
Of course, of course. Uh, I am a trained intellectual, uh, and there I was working in a very sensitive area of knowledge, which is political leadership. So yes, I asked myself that question several times. I wouldn't be, uh, trained. I wouldn't be an intellectual if I did not ask myself that question. And I'll tell you that there were many, especially anecdotes, that's pieces of facts, pieces of events. There were many anecdotes that I left out of the book for that reason. The reason that it might just have been too revealing and too much. But let me hasten to add that the lessons, the lessons were not treated in that manner. While I would have kept out certain anecdotes because, hey, they might be too revealing. The lessons, the substance of the manuscript, the substance of the book were not compromised. Okay? They were not left out. Everything that is substantial was included. And let me tell you, some feathers are going to be ruffled. Okay? Uh, Political leaders, politicians tend to be a little sensitive. So some feathers are going to be ruffled. However, I need to stress that this is not a frivolous book. It is not a mischievous book. This is not a tell-all celebrity book. Okay? This is not a place to come looking for salacious, scandalous detail on things that have nothing to do with leadership, right? This is a serious contribution to serious knowledge in an area, political leadership. It's a political leadership book that is vital. The knowledge is vital, in my view, in my assessment, in my own professional assessment. This knowledge is vital for the development for democracy, vital for the survival of our democracy in the Eastern Caribbean. Therefore, what is included in this book, this Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, is vital for the book because the book needs to have its own integrity. So it's vital for the book, what is in it. And it's also vital for the development of the Eastern Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Did you at any point seek consent rather from Prime Minister Skerritt to write the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook?
Interesting. Interesting.
Are you
No, let me, let me, did I cut you off? Sorry.
No, I did not hear the first part of what you said. So
Okay, no, I did not. I did not seek Prime Minister Skerritt's consent in writing this book. No, that said, I did not hide what I was writing on this subject. Okay. Not only did I not hide it, I tested a lot of my findings throughout the process in the public, right there on Kyrie, especially as the official spokesman, the public relations officer of the Dominican Labour Party. So no time was I being sneaky. At no time was I seeking to cover or hide anything. Okay. Then, so that's, a book written over 10 years. Then, when the book was taking final shape and I had secured a publisher for it, I wrote to several stakeholders to inform them in a formal way, in black and white, that this book was going to be published. In other words, I didn't want to surprise anybody about it. But I must tell you and your listeners that the contents of this book, were approved only by myself and my publisher. So to make it abundantly clear, I did not consult Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt on the strategies. I did not consult Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt on the content of the book. The strategies are based on over 10 years of observation. Okay? By the way, that's the way scientists work. Okay? It's important to know because there are other types of research out in the public. I do not do survey research. I do not ask opinions, right? I do not ask opinions. This is not an opinion book. The data is not from what people think, okay, which is survey research. That's not my method. I do not write and did not write here an interview book asking anybody, any practitioner, hey, what's on your mind? How do you do it? That's not my field. That's not my method. I work from observation. That is, things that happen and happen in the world and would be the same to anybody observing those things. And many of those things are in the public. So that is what is here. The method here is case study. And what it means is that most of these things played out in the public.
Yeah.
And
yeah, but
in short,
here's the interesting thing. Here's the interesting thing, though. And I know this just based on the work that I've done as a journalist. Something may be out in the public space. It's right before everybody's eyes. But when it is written down and told in a story form, it lands differently. People all of a sudden, it's as if they didn't just see that very same thing and you just wrote about it, but they feel differently about the story when they see it in black and white or hear it on the radio or see it on television. It's a strange thing that happens. Are you would you agree?
I totally agree. And again, this is the way writing works. And it is especially uh, the way that things are received, especially in the Eastern Caribbean. Uh, the Eastern Caribbean does not produce much research. There is not enough writing, especially book length writing, about many of our practices. Let's stick to political leadership. There is not enough writing about the political leadership practices of the Eastern Caribbean. Too many prime ministers, too many leaders, too many ministers do not leave a record of how they approach things, what they did, and so forth. This is a usual practice in the developed world. Okay, so your Tony Blairs, your almost every prime minister of the United Kingdom, every
And
president of the
and
United States. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
right. And but not just prime ministers. So for example, you have Kamala Harris now on a book tour with the book 107 Days, in which she tells you her story.
Yes, and her campaign story.
Correct.
Okay, and so on the 107 days, that number refers to the number of days of her campaign.
Yes.
So in the developed world, not only are university professors, journalists, magazine writers, journal writers, not only are these people writing on the political leadership practices of political leaders, the political leaders themselves are writing long form works, writing books for their campaign, that is before they get the positions that they're seeking, books during their governance and after. The point here is there is not much of that going on in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, our comrade Dr. Ralph Gonzalez
Is the exception, probably.
is an exception. Dr. Gonzalez just published his 15th and launched that book, his 15th book, by someone's count. Just did it in New York 2 weeks ago in the margins of the United Nations General Assembly High Level Week. But Dr. Gonzalez is an exception. And so what you have, which is very important for the development of our region, what you have is so many successful leaders and even failed leaders go to their graves without having shared a shred of wisdom about what they did. And we in the Eastern Caribbean, we have it even worse. For example, the long-term Prime Minister, Mary Eugenia Charles, her papers, that is, her documents, are deposited not in the Eastern Caribbean, not in Dominica, but in Barbados.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Philbert Aaron is very much irked by that.
Yes, of course, because this is
Why?
because
Why is it? And I think I'm going to give away the answer in my question. Why is it that the first long-serving prime minister of Dominica, the first woman prime minister of Dominica, the first record holder of any kind prime minister of Dominica on many levels, why does it irk you that she gave not to Dominica her work, but to another country?
it irks me because who did you lead? Not Barbados. You led Dominicans for 15 years. Okay, that's the country, that's the people you led. Dominica has thinkers, Dominica has intellectuals, you have colleagues and former colleagues. I believe it is your duty to make available whatever you are making available, to make it available on the most favorable basis to the community that you led. Why? Not only because you owe them that kind of thing, if you are, giving it out, because some people destroy their documents. If you are depositing them, they should be made available to the people that you led. Why? Because it contributes to the stock of knowledge of that community. In other words, it helps in the development of that society that you led. And when you led it, your claim was that your mission was to develop the place. Now, here is a key area of development, political leadership, that is made, access to that information is made more difficult by not depositing it in an accessible way in Dominica. Now, I'm passionate about that. And so I hope I haven't digressed on that. But
No,
my
I can
point
take you
here,
back. I can take you back, but go ahead.
yes, my point here is about the stock of knowledge about political leadership in the Eastern Caribbean. It is thin. It needs to get thicker. It has too many holes in it. There are too many things that we don't understand. There are too many things that we don't know. There are too many things that are speculating about. Okay? And so that becomes important in the work that I do in trying to discover how it is that we lead. Let me give you a quick anecdote.
Mm.
The Labour Party, which was the first representative political party in the history of Dominica, fell from power in 1979 in a really shameful way.
Mm-hmm.
And as young people at the time, many of us of a certain generation helped to take down the Dominica Labour Party. Mm-hmm. Now, while we were opposing the Dominica Labour Party, our parents were warning us that we did not know what we were doing. They were warning us that you will see what we went through. And eventually, what emerged was that the older generation had a certain type of knowledge about politics, political leadership, and political parties that they did not transmit to the next generation. They were treating that knowledge the same way they treat knowledge about sexual relations, relationships, love, money, and other issues. So, in a way, this is the kind of mission that I am on, to document the knowledge, especially the best knowledge, the best practices in political leadership of Dominica and the Eastern Caribbean, such that that knowledge, especially the best of it, can be transmitted from generation to generation, so that the errors that were made, the weaknesses that we had in political leadership knowledge, can be improved, can be fixed. And I think that's hugely significant for a community.
Now, significant, you say, but here's what I want to find out. With that knowledge that you're putting in the public space and filling that gap, is the book, 10, the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 strategies behind PM Skerritt's success. Is this book all praise all day? In other words, is it a how great thou art piece?
Great. No. No. Yes. So yes and no. But let me explain. Let me tell you what I mean.
Okay.
Okay. Here, whether you like it or not, Roosevelt Skerritt is an outlier leadership. Okay. He is not the average leader. He is outstanding. Okay. He goes against the best of the best and comes up on top, especially if you focus on my subject matter, which is the duration of the tenure of a prime minister of the Eastern Caribbean. Roosevelt Skerritt is out of the norm. He is not the average. He's above average. He's excellent. Okay. But this is not a how great thou art piece. It is a book about the success of Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt. It is not about Roosevelt Skerritt's personal life, for example. Okay? Now, what it is about the major achievements of Roosevelt Skerritt. And Roosevelt Skerritt is lasting a record long, record breaking 21 consecutive years. Okay? Now, that is an amazing achievement. That is above. If you were to run that in a statistical analysis to say how different is 21 years from average 7 years of all prime ministers and so forth, how much longer is it than 15 years, etc., you would get amazing results to show you objectively that Roosevelt Skerritt's 21 years are significantly different, are meaningfully longer than other prime ministers' tenure. Okay? These are facts. These are objective facts that sit and will actually withstand any kind of, criticism. Okay? Again, that said, Roosevelt Skerritt is human. Okay?
Is he?
What it means is, what it means is, as human, he makes mistakes. Like all of us humans, he makes mistakes. And when you consider that Roosevelt Skerritt became prime minister for a record young age, 31. And when you consider the affair that 31-year-olds are involved in, and you consider that Roosevelt Skerritt was running a country at age 31, the second youngest prime minister in the history of the job, in the history of the world, then you add to that fact that this guy, not only did he start 31, he has been running that country for 21 years. Okay? So what it means is that there are going to be brilliant days, and there are going to be days that are not so brilliant. And this book, this Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, would be doing the audience, the readers, Dominica, a disservice, and Skerritt too, a disservice, and Labour Party too, a disservice if it shied away from these mistakes. So this book, in other words, this book, it captures the two aspects of Skerritt, the amazing record-breaking achievements of Roosevelt Skerritt, And of course, it also analyzes the errors, or at least some of the errors that he has made. So no, you might be wondering what sort of errors, what sort of mistakes, for example,
Of course.
um,
Of course.
might be in this book. I'll give you two.
Tell me.
Okay, one of those highlights, okay, uh, is a very dark period in Skerritt's leadership journey that I call the period of navel gazing. By navel gazing, it's a reference to philosophers and thinkers who basically, uh, become absorbed in their own thoughts, right? So
Wait,
here's the
wait,
situation.
wait, wait, wait. Slow down, slow down, slow down. You
Yes, yes, yes. Mhm.
um, okay. So this is a piece that is not one of the not so great parts, and you call it a period of navel gazing.
That's correct.
Which period is that?
So it refers to the period of around 2014. And it's 2014 means the 2014 general election. And what you have there is this gentleman called Lennox Linton comes out of nowhere. Actually, comes out of journalism. Okay, actually, talk show hosting,
Thank you.
and gives Skerritt a body blow, a cool point, a punch to the gut, in the 2014 general elections. That for the first time, somebody grabs seats from Skerritt. Okay? So for 2 consecutive years, Roosevelt Skerritt had increased his seats in office. That had never happened in Dominica politics before. What had never happened? In the history of Dominica politics, at least in independence, a prime minister does not gain seats while he is sitting in the seat. He is not gaining seats as an incumbent. The pattern is usually you get your most seats fresh from opposition, and it's down, dig it down every next term, every successive election. So Roosevelt Skerritt comes and he reverses that. He starts building seat count. He gains more seats in 2005. He comes in 2004. He gains more seats in 2005. He gains more seats in 2009. In other words, his rocket ship has fuel. It is pointed upwards. It is headed for the stars. And in comes Lennox Linton, a talk show host, an unemployed person for 10 years. And for the first time, an opposition leader, he's not opposition leader yet, he does that before he becomes opposition leader, but the leader of an opposition party grabs 3 seats from Skerritt. And he takes Skerritt's seat count down from 18 in 2009 to 15 into 2014. And that affected Skerritt. And in my book, I conclude that it lost Skerritt his focus. So Skerritt, one of his qualities, one of his leadership qualities is focus. In my book also, I have Skerritt telling me personally that, yo, I don't check my scene, but I don't lose focus. Okay? Skerritt tells me that. And it also shows that he knows himself. Skerritt can focus. Okay? He focuses on his work, he focuses on whatever he's focusing on. And Reginald Austrie tells the story of Skerritt going to China to negotiate the establishment of diplomatic relations. And for hours and hours, is focused on discussions, you can call them negotiations, with China. So Skerritt has legendary focus.
By the way, I want to quickly add here Just for context, right? Um, the Not to give too much away, because I feel like I want to create some context here. When he tells you, I just check my scene, but I do not lose focus, that is a single Roosevelt Skerritt telling you that.
Oh yes, yes, and I state that in the book also.
Yes, you
Yeah,
say that in
let's.
the book,
Yeah.
and hear me well, everybody. Okay, you know, I'm a wife. I hear that in a particular way, so I want to bring your attention to the context.
Thank you for that. So the time when Roosevelt Scully told me that, okay, uh, he was a single man, and in other words, he's saying that the things that distract young people, young men included, don't distract me. I am focused. Okay? And that is true. Observation confirms that Roosevelt Skerritt has major focus. But I argue in this book that in the 2014 period, around the loss of 3 seats to Lennox Linton and United Workers' Party opposition, a series of events add up to Skerritt losing his focus, even if for a period, a short period. But the point is, this is analyzed in the book. This is not a how great thou art moment, and it is in the book. So I'm just trying to illustrate to you, the listeners, and to you, the interviewer, that this is not, making Skerritt a saint. This is not an effort to make Skerritt Saint Skerritt. Okay? This is Skerritt is a human, and this is a researcher, an intellectual, writing a book that has to be honest, meaningful, and absolutely authentic. So that is the case. But that is the tone book. It's
But
not an attempt. It's not an attempt to run a political campaign for Skerritt. This is an attempt to contribute to the stock, okay, of knowledge of political leadership in the Eastern Caribbean. That's what this is. Nothing mischievous, nothing salacious. Scientific work.
um, now I'm going to get into an excerpt of the book next, and I'll ask you a question, and then I'm going to get into an excerpt to give the listeners a feel of what this book is, because sometimes what happens with intellectuals is that they give you information. Yes, it is great information, but is it a great read? That makes a difference to the audience. And I can tell you, this covers both. It covers both. It gives you that groundbreaking information, and it is an amazing read. Now, let me ask you this, because I know people are wondering that question. You sit in New York as Dominica's ambassador to the United Nations. You serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. If every page is not how great thou art, when you were writing this book, did you think about the security of your job? Did you think, I probably could get fired for this?
Oh yes, of course. I thought about the security of my job. Um, I, I thought about the security of my job. As a matter of fact, many of my colleagues. So I have tons of colleagues, right? Dominica is one of 193 countries, and in discussing this book with many of my colleagues, that's a question they asked. I mean, are you not afraid for your job? Um, but also one of the things that they also said, oh man, uh, my leader would really love, I'm sure, to have such a book written about his practice and his leadership.
Is that what they said?
You won't believe it. They actually said that, including, you know, my leader would be envious. Believe it or not.
Yeah.
So
I,
it
I,
is
re-
a,
I remember hearing one particular um, OECS representative saying my prime minister is going to be jealous about this book. I heard that.
you heard well. You heard well. And what this means, as we discussed earlier, is that the treatment, the treatment of a leader in a book form, separate from a campaign book that says, you know, you're the best of all time, vote for you again. Treatment in a book form is a significant form of respect, significant form of total, you know, commitment to a subject, a worthy subject. Okay, so that is what it means. So to answer your questions, yes, of course, you know, I have had occasion to think about the security of my job. Now, I have the great honor of being part of a history-making uh, um, institution, United Nations, as Dominica's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. Okay, uh, no, that is an even greater honor. It's an even greater honor when you consider ces enfants à l'antenne péché, à l'antenne filet caillé, filet balao, ok, à l'antenne à lever bon matin pour aller boire de la mer, pour pousser canot, aller canot, semblé nom, and nous aller nom semblé. So my father was a fisherman, a humble man. And for example, after I left the sixth form college, I spent the summer period by the bay working on the nets with my father. Here's an interesting thing, by the way, that the first day I spent with my father on the nets, my load, my portion of the catch was 25 cents. Okay? So my father, who is, a funny guy, not a ha 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 funny guy, but, funny guy all the same. After we had dropped the nets, pulled the nets, okay, cleaned the nets, hung the nets, time for counting, the sales and so forth, and sharing the money. I was a man, like the other man. And my share was a quarter. You know how humble that is. 25 cents. Now, this is context for you to tell you how much I appreciate and understand the position that I'm in, to come from 25 cents as a Péché, the son of Negbod Lame Péché, be Dominica's ambassador to the United Nations. Okay, so I appreciate that. And now, so to be sitting with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is a big deal, especially for where I'm coming from. In Dominica in general, including that little corner of Dominica that is Lagon de la Rose in Abalagon, Aho Lagon. We may be in that little area, but our ears are attuned to the world. And so every day We have news piping in, especially about UN affairs. Coming up, you hear, SG Secretary General Kurt Waldheim, you hear Boutros Ghali, you hear Perez de Cuellar, you hear, from Kofi Annan. So that is in the culture, no matter how humble we are. But it makes it a big deal. It makes it a big deal. No, that's it. But um, I did think and do think about the security of my job. Um, hey, I have to also say that I am top talent, you know. Um, I hold a PhD in policy and leadership from the University of Maryland, College Park. And the University of Maryland, College Park is not Podunk University. It is a serious place. But here is what is also very important. I have used my talent to serve the Dominica Labour Party and to continue to do that. I put my expertise at the service of this leader and of this party. And I have done that for a very long time. So I believe, when all is said and done, I will receive, fair and honorable treatment. You know, um, but let me close it that way. Um, the Honorable Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has a saying himself. He says, uh, you know, a man is still a man, even if he has one hand, you know. And it's belief in our party, the Dominica Labour Party, okay? And plus today is my birthday. I'm not, I'm not a spring chicken. And and writing about leadership, I have to do the right thing. And the right thing is to give the proper and full treatment of the subject matter, which is Roosevelt Skerrit as political leader. So that I have done.
You are so Filbert with that response. It is 13 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock. We're going on till 8. We're going on till 8. The time is going so fast. Uh, I'm going to read an excerpt and continue the questions. We'll open up the lines as well, take some phone calls for you. Um, so here we go. From chapter 1, Start Very Tough. I am your Prime Minister, announced Roosevelt Skerrit on January 8, 2004, day one of his internal promotion to the top job in the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica. As it is with milkshakes and sandwiches in a free market, so it is with prime ministers in the Eastern Caribbean model. In a free market, every consumer good starts with a job that some customer wants done better. In an Eastern Caribbean model democracy, leadership selection satisfies a similar need of some elector. Skerritt's electors were 12 elected representatives, a majority of the 21 total in Parliament. Elected representatives serve as the gatekeepers of the job of Prime Minister. The 12 who had thrown their support behind Skerrit for Prime Minister had picked him to continue the job that tragically Pierre Charles no longer could. Charles, aged 49, died on the job of a heart attack on January 6, 2004, after succeeding Roosevelt Douglas, who had also died on the job of a heart attack on October 1, 2000, at age 58. The surviving elected representatives were transformed by the deaths of their leaders. They now knew the vacancy they had gathered to fill was a widowmaker job. It was not feasible. It cannot be done. It defeats 2 out of every 3 competent holders in a row. A widowmaker job must be redesigned, advises Peter F. Drucker, the concept's originator, or it will go on destroying human capital. However, there were constraints on redesigning that job because it is also a creature of the Dominica Constitution, which is entrenched. Any amendment to Dominica's British-made constitution requires the support of at least a 2/3 majority of the members. Redesign of the job was, therefore, not an option, as it would constitute an amendment of a basic structure of an entrenched constitution. Yet, these kingmakers were convinced that above all, the incoming prime minister needed to satisfy a new dimension of performance: durability. For the stability of the party and country, he needed to last. How then to ensure his durability without amending the Constitution? The 12 electors opted for relative youth. In other words, in pursuing prime ministerial durability, the election system steered away from the jurisdiction, more specifically its constitution, and the job of prime minister, and instead focused on the person. They recruited an exceptionally young man whose relative youth was because he was agile at self-directing his learning to lead from experience on the job. The rest of the mission of durability would be his to figure out. That is the recipe following which Roosevelt Skerritt was made a cross between the milkshake Clayton Christensen studied at McDonald's and the sandwich that Ron Scheck designed at Panera Bread, a consumer good. Roosevelt Skerritt, as cross between milkshake and sandwich, would have the further distinction of being ordered up, prepared, and served on one of the so-called small island developing states of the Eastern Caribbean that Dr. Donald C. Peters, political scientist, had theorized to be a one-of-a-kind political model based on small size. In one stroke, the mission of lasting in the job of Prime Minister of this small island transformed the new job holder into a living, breathing, direction-setting, people-aligning, rewarding, and punishing consumer good. At first, the new Prime Minister seemed a poor fit. His slight frame was enveloped in a dress suit that was too big. His white cotton undershirt peeped out under his Adam's apple. His tie was too busy with colors. He looked like a boy sent to do a man's job. It made sense. After all, he had been picked because under the pressure of time and the sadness of mourning, he seemed likely to last long in the widowmaker job because he was expected to live long. Wow. That's the start.
Thank you. Thank you for reading it that way, too. You amazing reader you are. But this, which is the beginning, the start of the opening of this book, the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, is meaningful because it captures not only the context in which Skerritt came to office, which is following two consecutive deaths in office of his immediate predecessors. In other words, a job that kills. Here is why it is especially meaningful. The term high quality has many meanings. And what high quality means here is that in the context in which Skerritt came to office on January 8, 2004, context of two predecessors dying within a 4-year span. And remember, not only two predecessors dying, it was within a short period of a change of prime minister. What that means is in about 5 years, there were 3 prime ministers. So Edison James leaves office in 2000. Okay, that's February 7th. Roosevelt Douglas becomes prime minister then and dies 8 months later in 2000. Pierre Charles becomes prime minister October 2nd, 2000, and dies on the job on January 6, 2004. So that is tumultuous change, a lot of change. That is in the leadership. Now, in the economy, major changes also. The economy throughout that period is crashing. Banana, the mainstay of the economy, is collapsing. Okay? There is an IMF type situation of stringency in the economy. All of that is happening. So what it means is that quality now becomes something peculiar. Quality includes a new dimension, lasting, because the society now needs stability. And so the context defines for Skerrit and the Labour Party and the government, coalition government, that this prime minister who comes in now at this period has to last, or else there will be additional instability in the country, and instability is good for nothing. So what this opening tells us is that Roosevelt Skerrit was selected to last. Now, he's done an amazing job of lasting. And that is primary context in the beginning.
7:21 in Dominica and the Eastern Caribbean. Let's take a break and come back. 7:21 already. We're taking a break. We're coming back. We're talking to Dr. Philbert Aaron, the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 strategies behind PM Skerrit's success. Coming back in just a while. Stay tuned.
This Wednesday night on Kyrie FM, a must-listen-to interview. What does it take to survive and thrive in Eastern Caribbean leadership? When 31-year-old Roosevelt Skerrit became Dominica's prime minister, he inherited more than just an office. He stepped into a position that had claimed the lives of two predecessors through heart attacks. How did this young leader transform a widowmaker role into 2 decades of sustained leadership? The answers reveal a gripping story of survival, strategy, and transformation in Caribbean politics. Join us for a riveting conversation with the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind the Prime Minister Skerrit's Success, Dr. Philbert Aaron, with the book that's got everyone talking about Dominica's political evolution. This Wednesday, October 8th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. only on Kyrie FM, the genuine sound of Dominica.
We're back at 7:22 in Dominica and the Eastern Caribbean. We are talking to Dr. Philbert Aaron. He is the author of the new book, groundbreaking book, to be very honest, titled The Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind PM Skerrit's Success. We'll take your phone calls. Until 8 o'clock. So the operator will let me know when there's a phone call, and feel free to call in as I continue to ask questions to Dr. Philbert Aaron. Actually, here's what I'm going to do. Because this is an extra special interview, I will provide another excerpt for these listeners on Kyrie FM in just a while. I'll provide another excerpt in just a while, a bonus excerpt that has not been published anywhere before. Question for you. How does our Eastern Caribbean political system differ from other democratic systems?
The main thing is size. It is, they are small systems, but as a result of being small, they cause, or they make feasible, they make possible something that is really amazing. That is, in these small states, the key thing is the quality of the social relationship between the leader and the follower, the prime minister and citizens, is not the same in other states, especially large states where this is not feasible at all. And this dimension, which is an effect of size, is really, really distinctive. And many observers, even political practitioners, do not get that. Mm-hmm. And it follows from what we discussed earlier, the definition of what is high quality, what is right, what is effective leadership. In a large country, millions and millions of people, effective leadership means one thing. In a tiny community of 70,000, of 100,000, of 30,000 in some cases in the Eastern Caribbean and so forth, what is feasible and what has evolved is that high quality, effective leadership means a tight bond, close relationship between the politician, prime minister, and citizens. And that is a key differentiator in our democracies.
What are the most misunderstood aspects of how power works in the Eastern Caribbean?
The main thing is, many people, even very smart people, you could say otherwise smart people, misunderstand how power is gained in the Eastern Caribbean. You have examples of unemployed politicians beating out wealthy, well-heeled incumbents. So acquiring political power in the Eastern Caribbean is different from other systems. And a particular aspect of gaining power, acquiring power, has to do with learning. How do you learn to lead? And that is a key thing. So overall, the way that power is gained, exercised, maintained, that is different. And you know who does not get that? Usually it's opposition politicians.
Usually.
Opposition politicians generally do not get that.
And why not?
It may have to do with their emotion. By emotion, I mean it is easy for people who fail, and being in opposition is a certain level of failure because the ultimate aim is to reach the promised land. Mm-hmm. And it is easy for people who are, you can say, fail or rejected, especially in a small society, to take it personally. And what that means is taking it personally, being offended, being hurt by it, prevents the politician from being objective, from seeing the system as it is, not as you imagine it, not as you wish it, but as it is in itself. If you were in the sky looking at it, you would see it for what it is. And so a number of opposition politicians fail to see the system as it is. It is a system on its own. It's a peculiar democracy. And a lot of respect to Dr. Donald C. Peters, the Dominican political scientist, for through his work, his work, the Eastern Caribbean, democracy in the Eastern Caribbean, the democratic system in the Eastern Caribbean, has opened my eyes to this phenomenon, the importance of small size and what it does and how it makes our democracy a peculiar democracy that is especially focused on emotions and power of the small man. Mm-hmm.
So pause on that. You're saying that Dr. Peters, political scientist, Dominican, is the one who contributed that knowledge that the Eastern Caribbean has a very specific model of politics and operation.
That's correct. That's Donald, our friend. But Dr. Donald C. Peters, political scientist, who has a very important text, and I urge everybody to read that text.
Listen, and interestingly enough, I came upon this because of you. You've been obsessed with that book for several years, and I was asking myself, how does how do journalists, people in Dominica, not know about this book more than they do? I just don't understand why it's not much more in public consciousness. So you opened my eyes to that book with some huge revelations about Eastern Caribbean politics.
You know what? In my book, in the Eastern Caribbean Political Playbook, I also refer to another, I won't say much about it, another very important writer that is Dominican that many do not know and do not read. That is Jean Rees, White Sargasso Seas. So there is a certain body of knowledge about Dominica that we need to, open our eyes to. And Dr. Donald Peters is Eastern Caribbean political system, democratic system is one of those. And I was inspired by it. When I say inspired, it is the source of the analytical framework that I use to build upon to write this book. So thanks to Dr. Donald Peters on that. I have recommended his work to scholars in democracy and politics in Europe and elsewhere, and they use it in their teaching, eminent scholars. And so I recommend it to our listeners. Great work.
What unique challenges, I should add, do prime ministers in the Eastern Caribbean face compared to other world leaders?
Especially the small scale of our democracy. That is, that our democracy, its power aspects operate in tiny spaces that are defined by relationships between individuals, not huge systems. We don't have a huge military. We don't have a large economy. Huge abstractions don't really matter in this system. Certain data in many political systems, key indicators are very important. What's the rate of inflation? What's the numbers, for example? This is not as critical in our tiny East Caribbean democracies. It's not as important. And many who aspire to attain political office, unfortunately, are hung up on these things, even if it does not pay out. So this is an example, again, of people having difficulty learning the political system that they are in because their eyes are not seeing the reality of the political system. So that's one of the biggest challenges. The small scale, it's as difficult to see small as it is difficult to see big. So the small scale of our democracy, it is. Because, basically, on paper, this Dominica, this Eastern Caribbean, the states of the Eastern Caribbean, on paper, they function as, any ordinary state. But if you approach them that way, you make a big mistake because they are, yes, national communities, they are states, they are nations, but they function like local communities. They function like local communities, both in the intimacy of the relationship between leader and follower, as well as the attention to the detail of life of citizens, as well as the life of leaders. So those dimensions, many aspiring politicians do not manage well, do not understand, do not get at all.
What's the one thing, or you know what? Let me ask you something, s- something slightly different. What surprised you most during your research for this book?
The main and biggest surprise to me was that lasting long as Prime Minister in Eastern Caribbean rotates on, it is built on the person, both of the Prime Minister and opposition leaders. Now, the person as opposed to the job, the person as opposed to the election system. This is important because, opposition parties are spending fortunes seeking to reform the election system. They are spending fortunes. They are protesting,
So what do
creating
you mean?
issues about the job.
So what do you mean the person? Explain that.
The, the person here refers to the characteristics of the person, and I'll explain what those characteristics are. You can break up the characteristics of the person into two important categories. One, they're demographic categories, that is the person black, white, male, female? Those characteristics. These are important.
Mm-hmm.
The Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, has a history of slavery. So race is a major organizer of the society. Social class is a major organizer of the society. And Dr. Donald C. Peters tells you that the system, politics of the Eastern Caribbean, is based on antagonism between those groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So listeners will hear reference to small man, little man, poor man, barefoot man. These are references to this. But probably the more important category is the category of professional qualities that this person has. Because a non-Black person, Ralph in St. Vincent, can overcome the racial barrier. How? Through professional qualities, especially being able to learn to teach yourself, to learn to lead, not from a book, not from a lecture, not from a workshop, not from coursework at a university, but to learn the leadership practice by being on the job. Which job? The job of seeking a vote, seeking an office. This is the way it's done in the Eastern Caribbean. And this sounds so simple that many people miss it. In other words, in the United States, you're running for office, legal is the first thing. The laws around raising funds, registering, declaring funds, and so forth. In the Eastern Caribbean, you can run an election with a few $100s. Reginald Austri did it in Cottage and beat out an incumbent. You can run with very little funds, but you must have a lot of time. You must spend a lot of time with people. You can run with little money, but you must have a lot of ability to learn leadership. Okay? These are the qualities that are very necessary. Most people overlook those. They are too simple. They are too ordinary. The reason why these are so important in that political system is because the elite in that political system is not the highly educated or the wealthy. The elite is a working class Black, and in Dominica, Calinago, majority, but elite. And that colors, in addition to small size, colors the nature of politics in the region, the nature of power. And unless you master those, unless you master the Eastern Caribbean political playbook, political power playbook, you will toil in vain. You can have a lot of money, which can be even a barrier, a problem, and you will toil in vain unless you understand those dimensions of power in the Eastern Caribbean and how you gain it.
Now, you just said something that I'm curious about, and then I'm going to ask you what I think is part of the main thing, and then I'll give another excerpt here. Um, you said the elite is the working class, the elite in the Eastern Caribbean model in the political system. Explain what that means.
So I should have qualified the political elite. Elite means those who are chosen. So, okay, those who are the select group. It doesn't mean necessarily few. So the elite, the political elite, those who have power, those who determine power in the Eastern Caribbean are the working class. And the working class of the Eastern Caribbean, predominantly of African ancestry, meaning predominantly Black. In Dominica, which has, and St. Vincent, of course, which has a history and so long survival of indigenous people, you have an important indigenous component also. But the social class origin is working class. And that means a lot. It means specifically that that working class has a history of having been first to the market with a political organization. That is, they were the first to organize political parties. So, in other words, they are an elite in the operation of power, democratic power. Mm-hmm. They were the first to organize political parties. Why? Because political parties came from trade unions, and they were the first to organize trade unions. And they were the first to organize trade unions because they came from slavery. And as a result, they have developed those practices. And in the Eastern Caribbean, they maintain those practices. And I suggest, I theorize that one of the reasons why so little is known about gaining and maintaining power in the Eastern Caribbean is that the working class, I believe, has organized itself to not make its knowledge explicit to all and sundry. In other words, yes, I believe it is a way of competing with the middle class. The middle class in other countries in the world, the middle class and the military, the army, are the biggest competitors with the working class for power. In the Eastern Caribbean, another characteristic of our societies is that we do not have militaries, or we do not have sizable militaries. So the main competitor for power in the Eastern Caribbean with the elite, the working class elite, is the middle class. And I believe that the working class has organized its political dominance, the knowledge of political leadership, in such a way that it is not easily accessible to the middle class. One such way, I believe, from my research, is not teaching it explicitly. Why? Because schools are dominated by middle class people. And if you, that knowledge, you make it explicit and teach it so widely through these wide institutions of schooling, before you know it, the middle class will dominate that knowledge and potentially displace the working class in the only sphere of life that the working class dominates, which is the politics of the Eastern Caribbean. Now, many people miss that. Many people miss that in this Eastern Caribbean, who is running the show is poor people. That doesn't happen generally in democracies. Democracies and capitalism have worked together hand in hand, such that in most democracies, it is the middle class or the wealthy that run the show. At the United Nations, you can see that working very interestingly, because the tiniest island states, those of the Eastern Caribbean, are represented by Black diplomats and Black leaders who have a sense of power that many of their peers do not understand or appreciate. And it's because of that.
Let's get to the 10 strategies, the actual strategies that you lay out in the book. How much do you want to share about those strategies? Or let me ask you the question in a different way. Talk to me about the 10 strategies that create what you are setting up as the power playbook, the political power playbook of the Eastern Caribbean.
Yes. So from my research, from my gathering of data, my observation, and categorizing the practices of the political leaders, the prime ministers of the Eastern Caribbean, I arrived at 10 steady practices. The first one is start very tough, which simply means that the prime minister of the Eastern Caribbean must not only be elected representative, which he must not only be prime minister, he must also be political leader of his party, and he must preferably be minister for finance. And those positions are what set up his leadership, not only from day to day, but that's the foundation for lasting long. And by the way, at one point, a few years ago, in the Eastern Caribbean, every single prime minister had all those positions. Prime minister, political leader, minister for finance, and elected representative. The Honorable Ralph Gonzalez passed finance to his son, and the Honorable Roosevelt Skerritt ceded finance to the very trustworthy Dr. Irving McIntyre.
So that's go ahead. That's strategy. That's strategy number one. Start very tough. So quickly, I want you to answer this question on start very tough. How is it that only two people saw that as a thing? Mary Junior Charles and now Roosevelt Skerritt saw it as a thing that sets up the entire system for long tenure.
They have these two, Mary Eugenia Charles and Roosevelt Skerritt, have similar qualities. Mary Eugenia Charles was a woman, which makes that difference allows you to see in a way that the majority does not see. Women may be the numerical majority, but men dominate power. And so likely a woman politician will observe things that others don't. For sure, she learned in a way others did not. Roosevelt Skerritt, his distinction was youth. Okay, so Roosevelt Skerritt being the youngest in the parliament elected, in cabinet, added to other characteristics that he has, will allow him to see things that others do not see. And those are key parts of learning to lead that these two have had that lead towards their lasting long.
Tell me about another strategy without giving the entire
Number
book.
Number two, once you start strong, start tough, you need to dominate decision making. That might sound terrible, especially to a certain group in the opposition. It's not scientific. Dominate decision making, just, there's a saying in English, if two men ride a horse, one must be in front. In other words, you must be a leader. Mm-hmm. You must lead. And so dominate decision making means you have your fingerprints, right, in controlling the government, in all over the government. It is part of being responsible for the entire government, for the fate of the government, including for lasting. That's dominant decision making. I can give you a third. A third, very familiar to the Dominican people, is diversified foreign policy. Diversified foreign policy, just like in agriculture, you diversify agriculture. We were one crop economies. We try to diversify. Similarly, coming out of the colonial period, we had only relationship with the mother country, United Kingdom. So, very wise strategy is to diversify. And that is the third. There are seven others. I give you three.
Yeah, what is interesting to me is once you say it out loud, it sounds so obvious, like, well, duh, why didn't I think of that? That sounds like that makes sense. But clearly, clearly, no one else did it except these two people. So it's not
Absolutely.
obvious.
Yes. And I
So
need to stress.
there's that kind of you know, it sounds obvious, but clearly it was not because several people, you know, who felt themselves very strong, you know, politically, did not do those things.
Absolutely. None of the five in Dominica who had short tenures uh, gave themselves Minister for Finance in the first year, which is the start. When you set the tone for your administration, none of them did. So all five did not start tough. All five lasted short. Two started tough. Two lasted long. That is remarkable alignment in statistics. No matter how small the numbers here, 5 and 2, that is remarkable.
One would also say you had two who died, so that is also that is something that happened to them, um, rather than they
Yeah,
themselves losing power. How would you
that's
respond
true.
to that?
Being voted out is something that happens to them too. My point here is uh, death is also a factor of the person. It's a characteristic of the person. Okay,
Meaning
it's a
what?
demo. That is, death comes from your health status, including your pressure level on the job. So I understand, we in the Eastern Caribbean are heavily religious. And so we understand death as an intervention of God without any reference to anything on earth, a complete divine comedy. But in politics, death can come by assassination, death can come naturally, death can come in those ways. And so, leadership takes that into consideration. That's why there is an emphasis on wellness in leadership these days. So it is not just something that is imposed externally. It is important also in the consideration of how you perform.
It is 7:54. I'm going to read an excerpt from the book, and I'm going to take it from chapter 10. And chapter 10 is Quit While You're Ahead. First time in the public space. Skerritt, the person, is, as illustrated here, the chief architect of his long tenure as Prime Minister. 5 out of Skerritt's 6 predecessors exited office in less than 6 years on the job or scored short tenure. Arranged from shortest to longest, the durability scores were Patrick John, 234 days, Roosevelt Douglas, 241 days, Oliver Serafin, 1 year, 26 days, Pierre Charles, 3 years, 97 days, and Edison James, 4 years, 234 days. Only one of Skerritt's 6 predecessors, Mary Eugenia Charles, scored a long tenure or longer than 6 years. To say that Skerritt is the chief architect of his long tenure does not mean that he's the sole person creating his durability. Skerritt was not the only person to play an important role in the duration of his tenure. Opposite Skerritt, his arch nemesis, the old wolf, Edison James, served unwittingly as co-chief architect of Skerritt's long tenure. Together, both operating under the rubric of person-related variables, co-caused the duration of Skerritt's tenure by acquisition and deployment of political leadership knowledge and expertise. Workers are, however, not convinced. They explain Skerritt's tenure using one person factor, official corruption. This account demonstrated that the job is a very meaningful explainer of long tenure. By charging Skerritt in court with numerous counts of official corruption on numerous occasions, the workers' opposition was in fact claiming the job to play a meaningful role in Skerritt's leadership durability. Sure, the job of Prime Minister has numerous powers and functions, as well as privileges that contribute to prime ministerial durability. However, these are only potentialities. These potentialities must be actualized, as in the case of Skerritt, so structuring the jobs, Prime Minister, political leader, Minister for Finance, and elected representative, as to co-create a super job out of the component jobs. As it is with the job, so also it is with the election system. Sure, the election system has loopholes. Every election system does. However, workers went down a rabbit hole, reasoning that their only hope for electoral success was conditioned on first achieving electoral reform to close the loopholes purportedly exploited by Skerritt. Ironically, the road to electoral reform runs through an elite discourse, enactment of legislation. However, the model makes the Prime Minister, as leader of Parliament, the gatekeeper to legislation too. Making the Prime Minister such a gatekeeper gives this political model a feature that helps it to protect itself from the minority. Stated otherwise, to protect itself from radical impulses, the model forces the United Workers' Party would-be election reformers to spin top in mud, including boycotting a snap general election. It gives them little grip. Even more interestingly, at a time when workers was pushing their election reform agenda, they chose to stay out of Parliament by boycotting the 2022 general elections. In this way, they put the campaign at the mercy of the Prime Minister. So, on the August 29, 2023 edition of Matt in the Morning, The Hot Seat, the self-billed most talked about talk show in Dominica on opposition-affiliated Q95 FM radio, evidence surfaced that Skerritt had co-opted a so-called election reform movement that had seemed to have momentum until then. Gabriel Christian, a Dominican attorney at law based in the United States, submitted a voice note to Matt. The host played it on air, and which summed it all up. The Constitution is a con, said Christian of cabinet-arranged discussions of the proposed legislation. Regular caller Blessings delivered the coup de grace. Something needs to break, Blessing said. Skerritt had co-opted election reform, like he had co-opted Charles Savre, Frederick Barron, Lauren Bannis Roberts, Julius Timothy, Joseph Isaac, and the Dominica Freedom Party. Matt, I have said so many times, said an anonymous voice note, it will only take a revolution. That latter participant seemed unaware that revolution as a route to power in the Eastern Caribbean model had long failed, most spectacularly in Grenada Revolution of 1979 to 1983. Mr. Skerritt is under no pressure, said Wayne James, the brother of former Workers' Prime Minister Edison James, to Matt Peltier Jr., host of Matt in the Morning, The Hot Seat on October 23, 2023, quite wisely. Skerritt Caco Dominica, said an anonymous caller to The Hot Seat on October 26, 2023. The Dominica English Creole Dictionary puts the meaning of caco as to charm by means of love potion, in response to reference to love potions as an explainer for Skerritt's prime ministerial longevity. Matt, the host of the hot seat, advised an equally superstitious antidote. Go where the river meets the sea, Matt advised, only half jokingly. Use your left shoe. Fill it with water. Drink, drink. These explainers sum up a major part of the role played by the jurisdiction in Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt's 21-year-long prime ministerial career. The political opposition both lacks agility at self-directing its learning to lead from experience and is unscientific in its approach to political leadership. What do you want the readers to take away from this book as we close?
Especially what you just read, that Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerritt has lasted 21 consecutive years because one, he has taken full and total responsibility for his political leadership career and has done so in a scientific and disciplined manner. And on the other hand, the political opposition, whose leader of the opposition has the function of ending the duration of the prime minister's career, they have failed to do so because they are, as you just read, unscientific. So they contribute to the long duration of Prime Minister Skerritt.
That alone has so many questions, but we'll leave it right there. Dr. Philbert Aaron, the author of the Eastern Caribbean Political Power Playbook, 10 Strategies Behind PM Skerritt's Success. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you will hear much more of the book as the ramp to the official launch of this book launching ceremony. This book has been officially launched today, and you will be able to find it today online at the website of the publisher. And then the publisher is expected to roll out a global distribution of the book. So you will be able to find it at the following website if you go there right now before the global launch of the playbook. www.madpar.com/playbook. I'll say it again. www.madpar/playbook. You'll find it there, and you'll hear much more as the ramp to this book continues from this fall going into the spring of 2026. I'm Kamala Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us.